Hello, everyone, and welcome to Focus and Foundations. My name is Tina Kramer. I'm the creator of Simple Learning and the patent pending sound device, and I'm here with my dear friend, Kelley. Kelley, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Kelley Phipps, and I own Empowering Minds, where we work with adults and kids that have any number of learning issues that stem from disorientation. So today we're going to talk.
So we decided we're going to talk about past clients that we've had, challenges that they've had that brought them to us, and then the positive change that we were able to create in their lives. So do you have a student? Do you have a client in mind, Kelley?
I do. Right when we talked about this, I got really excited because I have so many great stories. And so because we have been discussing situations with disorientation, and really we've been talking about motivation and executive functioning over the last few podcasts, I was thinking of those students specifically and how this aspect of being a different learner has caused some problems. So last year, about this time, I had the blessing of meeting a young man that was, at that time, he was in 7th grade. Very much a very, very fast thinker and minded in that he wanted to do well in school. He wanted to do well in school and he wanted to do well in math. So he wanted me to make him do well in math. That was his intention. You're going to make me good at math. And you're going to do it in this way, and you're going to do it my way. And typically, I say, yeah, no, not going to do that. But he just really, really, really wanted to do well in math. He had this need, this desire. So I broke my cardinal rule, which is if the kid's not going to agree to do things my way, I'm not going to work with them. And I thought, we'll try tutoring, see what happens. So I set him up with a tutor, and he gave so much pushback. There was no way. So this poor tutor says, Kelley, he is not agreeable. And so I had to say to him straight out, all right, I'll take you on for tutoring for one session. And if you don't agree, then you don't get to come back. And we did one session, and I said, yeah, no, you let me know when you're ready for us. We're here, but you're not coming back. And oh my gosh, right? That is so painful for me.
Yes, I've had to do that with a handful of my clients.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always walk away from them in tears. I don't let them know that.
Right.
But I get to the car and then I break down.
Yeah. So here he goes. So 2 weeks later, I get this call saying, I want to work. So we set up an intensive program. And the struggle he had was math academically, but the struggle really internally he had was focus and attention. So I provided what I call a focused attention program. And we went down this path together. And the coolest thing ever, he was motivated, he was willing, and he started to listen to me, and he started to implement just little tiny bits, but huge things in his life. And we would work for at least 5 days to be able to provide this program. We had some little hiccups in that he got sick and we couldn't do a day. And he also didn't have the stamina, because, when you're rewiring the brain, which is what we do in essence, it takes a lot of effort. So he didn't quite have the stamina the first day. So what should have been 25 hours together ended up being more like 15 hours together. But those 15 hours were magic. The child came back 2 more times for follow-ups with me, and follow-up looks like maybe 1.5 to 2 hours. And I have not seen him since. He got Student of the Month right off the bat, and he's maintained grades. And that was all of last year. So we worked together in March. And so he maintained his grades through the school year and then started this fall. I'm always like, okay, let me know if you need to come back. He's like, nope, I got it. I'm like, okay, you're sure? You got it. I got it. You tell me what you're doing. He's telling me. I'm like, okay, this is through a
Got
phone
it.
call, mind you. This is through a phone call. And he has maintained A's and B's this entire time. His parents are just amazed at the overall change in him. Now, he's still himself. He's still crazy busy. He's still a little impulsive, right? But he's doing what he needs to do and he's finding success. And it was the very best. It was so exciting.
Well, and I think like there at the end, what you said, he's still him. You know, we don't change a person in the sense that we take away the essence of who they are. We give them the missing pieces so
Exactly.
that they can become well-rounded and successful in all aspects of their life. So that's a
Exactly.
beautiful,
Exactly.
beautiful story. Wonderful.
Yeah. So cool. So cool.
So when I sat down and thought about, you know, who I would like to share about, I have to go all the way back. And part of the reason why I got started on this path. So I had this lovely young lady when I was teaching in international schools in Hong Kong. And she was in my 7th grade math classes. And it was the beginning of the year. And we had meet the teacher night. And you know how all the parents come in and you're standing there and everybody's meeting and you're talking and everything, but I could see there was a mother that was standing off to the side. And the whole evening, parents were coming up and I could just see her and she was just off to the side. And I'm like, I have the feeling she's waiting to talk to me. So finally we got toward the end of the evening and I had a break and she came up to me and she said, "Will you have my daughter in your math class? And I just wanted to let you know and introduce myself." And I said the thing that you always say as a new teacher, "Oh, it's a pleasure. I look forward to being part of your child's learning journey and creating success." And she says, "Well, if you managed to create success for her, you'll be the first teacher that ever did." And I was like, oh, I didn't know what to say, to be quite honest, and went, "We'll make sure that, you know," I made sure that I had her name and her information. And I said, I'll bring her to the top, you know, of the list. I'll pay attention and see if I can figure out what's going on. And the mother left. She was harsh. And I was like, okay, wow. So sure enough, okay, so let me back up just a little bit. Oftentimes our students, now I'm talking about trends, I'm not talking about absolutes, but our students will academically have challenges, but then you'll also see them have possibly challenges as far as balance or clumsiness, or they'll be socially challenged. They're not always the kids that are well liked, just to be blunt. This young lady was very different. Her name was Caroline. She was on the rugby team. She was adored by her peers. She was very popular, skilled athletically. She did well in all of her other classes. And then she came to math. And I have never met a student that worked as hard as she did and flunked everything I put in front of her. Like not the kid that you could work with them and you could at least generate C level work. I tutored her at lunch. I worked with her after school. She flunked everything. She could not remember multiplication tables, even the basic ones, like the 2s and the 5s that usually even the kids that can't do multiplication tables will remember those. Couldn't even do those. So it was brand new to me that I was starting to do this research. I was starting to read some books on the subject. I was starting to understand this idea of focus, and that your focus can actually be out of balance with the physical body. So this was very much in the beginning. Truth be told, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was starting to figure it out. So I went to the mother and I said, "I'd like to try something new with your daughter." And she basically said, "Well, we don't have anything to lose, sure." So I did a very basic version of the work that I do now. And I had a sound at that point in time that she did listen to, again, a version of what I'm doing now. And she would have been a student that had dyscalculia. So dyscalculia is comparable to dyslexia, but it's with numbers, it's with math. And Kelly, I know you know that, but a lot of times I'll say dyscalculia and people are like, I've never heard of that. What is that? So that can occur in relation to symbols and numbers and amounts and sequences. And she definitely was that young lady. So we did a program together. And again, keep in mind, this was a really hardworking kid that wanted the good grades and had good grades everywhere else. And after we completed the program working with each other, and for her, I met with her after school. It took a couple months and you just saw her grades starting to increase. And then it was about the beginning of the second month and she came to me and she said, I don't know, I don't understand why, but everything you tried to teach me makes sense now. And this has been, this was the beginning of my career in working with students and individuals that have learning differences. So she went on, she's originally from South Africa. She went back to her home country and was put into a Catholic boarding school. And I got a letter from her, basically her senior year of high school. And it was one of those letters that makes a teacher sit down and cry because it said, you were my one. You were my teacher that made all the difference. She graduated with a B average in math. And I still have that letter to this day. I will never let go of that letter. I so treasure it and I treasure her because she was the one that set me on my path to work with a child that wanted, just like what you're saying, they want to succeed and they can't understand why. I did have the opportunity to talk to the mother, and the mother had had the same challenge in school. And that's how I finally realized and put two and two together as to why that mother was so harsh, because she had dealt with that her whole life. And she was a successful woman. She was a nurse, but she had figured out ways to work around calculations and actual math.
Yeah, that workaround, right? That we find that most adults in today's world, and maybe always, right, that have had a learning difference, they figure out a workaround or they completely fail.
Yeah.
And I'd say more often they find a workaround, something that works for them. But the struggle is it's inefficient. Right. And because it's inefficient, it takes you so much longer.
Yeah.
It's become the norm today that people expect to have to read and reread. You so seldom come across someone that says, yeah, I read it the first time, and of course I understood it. And yes, I was able to answer those questions.
Yeah.
That's pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
So I feel like as we see these success stories for our younger people, right, that it hopefully becomes a family affair. It's one of the things I always tell my families that I work with, because that's kind of the way I put it. It's a family affair. So I'm going to working with the child, but I'm working with your family.
Yes.
Because it came from somewhere. And if we can help your child, we're going to help you guys as a whole to get stronger, right? But if we can help them to assimilate these new tools within their household, then in and of itself, everything becomes more efficient. And hopefully those traumas, because really what you were describing is a learning trauma.
Yes, absolutely.
Can find a spot that there can be some healing and it doesn't get passed on, this fear. So thinking academically, I was going to pull, I'm thinking, who do I pull? I was going to pull somebody that I worked with that is autistic, but never really had the label, but everybody knew it, right? And I thought, I'm going to give you another academic one. So this is another recent one for me. And the most phenomenal. I got to work with a 15-year-old who was diagnosed when she was in 5th grade with dyslexia. And so the full-blown diagnosis that came from a neuropsychologist, not something they were able to provide in the school setting because she didn't qualify to be even assessed at the school setting. And she had enough skill and enough grit to be able to push her way through. So she always was not low enough, but clearly has dyslexia, right? So there's a struggle there.
Right.
So the parents found me, and they found me because of actually a program that was out there that kind of made it available. So there were some tutoring dollars. And the way we work is if you come in for tutoring, chances are there's a reason for it. So this parent found my name on this website and it's like, you work with dyslexia? Who works with dyslexia? Nobody can do anything about dyslexia. So they called. So of course, as you describe their child, because the characteristics, it's a characteristics of a learning difference. And it just happens to show up in reading.
Right.
It could show up in math, it could show up in only writing, it could show up in social things. But in this case, it showed up in reading. And they start to see that you talk their talk, right? They understand, how do you know my child? So anyways, I was able to do a program with this young lady, and we're in the middle right now of follow-up. But as she started to realize that she could control her imagination and she could control her energy, and she knew what it felt like to have it be present, and she knew what it felt like for it not to be present. And then she could realize that, oh, when I do this, I get this result, right? When I'm fully here, I get one result. When I'm not, I get a different result. So the more I want to be present, the better it's going to get. As that started happening on day one, her first thing was, oh my gosh, right? So then I encourage her, use your tools when you go to sleep tonight. See what happens with you. Well, someone who normally lays there for an hour and a half, all of a sudden went to sleep. And she comes back and she says, I slept all night. And I'm like, all right. I said, well, let's keep moving. So we worked through the alphabet, and then we went on into looking at what we call trigger words, words that cause our imagination to move because we don't easily understand them. They're not a word that comes easily to picture. And then we started looking at other things in her environment. And as it is, she thinks really, really fast, which serves her well in many aspects of life, but does not serve her well academically. Right. And then she also has a really decent vocabulary without a lot of understanding. So the coolest thing is, as I'm going through the normal steps that I do with every student I work with, she started moving ahead just a little faster than me, in that it just started to make sense. So before you knew it, she went from reading at a 5th grade level fluently to reading at a 9th grade level fluently. And we're talking within our program days. So like this is by day 3. And she's starting to understanding what she's reading. I'm asking her, why are you understanding what's happening? She goes, well, you told me about those punctuation marks and what they mean. She said, so I figure, well, I'm probably supposed to have some pictures. I'm like, score? So I'm like, let's take a minute and let me be intentional and teach you about that. So she had never considered the fact that reading was like listening, and that you should understand what you're reading. So that means you should have pictures while you read. And as she started putting 2 and 2 together and actually practicing, what ended up happening on the last day of our program, this is before I taught her parents or her mother about this, she read a 9th grade level reading about the Statue of Liberty, which was the paperwork that I pulled it from. It's about a 300 to 350 word essay about the Statue of Liberty, lots of details. And it was originally printed in 2 columns in 11, size 11 font. So Times New Roman 11, you guys, and that's really small. Yeah. And so it would all fit on 1 page, right? So I showed her that and she's like, oh. So I then enlarged it just 1 point. So it went from 11 to 12, and I made a little bit wider font, or not font, but gave her a little more space. So I did it like that 1.15 or whatever, just a little bit more. And I showed her, I said, what do you think of this? She goes, oh, I can read that. No change in the words, just how it looked on the page. I'm like, okay, you read it. And she used this process of making mental pictures as she's reading. And then I gave her a 10-question quiz that came along with it. So it's the exact same thing. I pulled it out of a ninth grade comprehension notebook. And I didn't do anything to nothing to that quiz, other than I gave her a piece of paper. So she only looked at one question at a time.
Yeah.
And she was able to recall that entire passage on her own after the first read and got 100%.
Yay.
Yes. And she was just like, are you kidding me? And then she says, I can't wait. Actually, it was day 2. She goes, I can't wait to take notes in history. I'm like, cool. So anyways, here's a child that has a goal to go to the Air Force Academy, that wants to be a veterinarian, that has a plan, knows how to get there. And we just took away the stumbling block. And so I don't know, I'm excited to hear from her, because I bet in 5 years, look, makes me cry. But super cool, right? And
Yeah,
to just
absolutely.
be able to do it.
And just like you said, there's stumbling blocks. You know, this isn't all of our students, but typically we can work with a student in the reading, you know, by the end of the week, by the time that we're working with them, they'll be at reading level.
Right.
And
if they've come in, and there's key things, right? I tell this to every family. Your kids need to be read to. They need to have a high vocabulary. Do not allow them never to be put in that classroom. Right. They need to know age appropriate vocabulary, or they will have a hard time reading it.
Yeah. Yeah. There definitely are factors that contribute, but if we've got the kid, you know, that they've got all of those in place, and then we can show them that stumbling block, where that block is, and we remove that for them. They it's so amazing when they like make the connection. You're like, yes, you're so smart.
Well, and to see the parents when they see their kid and they're like, can I do that? I'm like, absolutely. She can teach you everything that I taught her. Right? It's not, you know, she owns it. She can do whatever she needs to do with that information.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
All right. So one more story. I'll make a quick story. I had an adult man come to me, married with children. He had dealt with trauma at a young age in the form of neglect. And he basically said, Tina, can you help me feel? Can you help me experience emotions? He was successful. He had a whole lot of workarounds in his life, but he preferred to be by himself. Peopling tended to be too much for him. So we sat down and we had a conversation. So the work that I'm doing, we are paralleling neurotypical development. And so in the neurotypical development, if we go back to around the age of 2 and 3, we start to get an identity of self. We start to realize who we are. And if you're a parent, you're going to know this as the terrible twos. And you're also going to recognize the fact that it's a challenging time. And oftentimes anger is part of it, you know, because there are temper tantrums. So before I start with an adult, I explain what I've just said to you. We're going to parallel neurotypical development, which basically I'm saying you're going to hit a period of time where you're going to get angry. Now, are you sure you're okay with this? Because it is part of the journey. It's amazing that we now can do this. We're going to turn your emotions on for you or springboard them. However, you have to recognize when we hit that phase, it's not always a lot of fun. So he was on board. And I started taking him through the techniques and the concepts. And about mid-program is when, you know, I usually see the shift. So we hit mid-program, and he got very angry. He got very angry with me, which if I'm going to do this type of work, I'm okay with. And anger is usually one of the first major emotions that they'll start to experience that ones will open up. And that's exactly what happened for this gentleman. And it took another 2 or 3 sessions. Typically I'm working with somebody 8 to 10 weeks, and I'm working with them for 1 to 2 hours a week. So we are now ready for our 10th. He really turned a corner and now is experiencing emotions. He's
Yay.
connecting to his wife, he's connecting to his children, his peers. He had been asked to lead a men's group where he didn't want to. He's like, that's too people-y. And he ended up taking that on, and the other people in the men's group with him are noticing the change in him, his personality, and he's really starting to come out where he was more closed down, more aloof. So it is very humbling. It's humbling to get to work with all of our clients, but when a man comes, and he's somebody that had seen psychologists, he'd actually tried to do a lot of work and get help, and they would tell him, I'm sorry, you're just too shut down and we don't know how to help you. So by the time he came to me, he was very pessimistic. It's really nice to get that positive feedback from him and then also the family.
Yeah. Wow. You know what's super exciting about the stories that we both have, right, is that every person is unique. But you know what? The pathway is very similar because it's part of the human development.
Yes.
And because we're all human, we follow this path. And it really, like you said, is humbling to be privileged to get to walk alongside someone as they start discovering their amazing abilities, right? They discover, and the way I put it is, this is who we're going to unlock who you were meant to be, so that you have your choices that you want in life, whether it has to do with academics or social. You're going to have those choices, and everyone should have those choices. So follow us on this path, see where it goes, and we'll get there. And it takes as long as it takes, right? And there's been always unique journeys where for me as a facilitator, I like, oh my gosh, are we ever going to get there? Right? And we always do. We always do. I have never, and I bet Tina, you'll feel the same way, have not had a situation where I would say we failed.
No, I have had clients like what you said, that we have to step away from them. They're just not ready yet. But they come back around to us when they are ready. So when they do ask us, we both say, because I know you do as well, it takes as long as it takes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure.
It's just so wonderful for them because they work so hard and they deserve to have success.
Yeah, for sure. Tina, thank you so much for this topic today. I am so thankful for this journey that you and I have both been on and continue to be on, and having the opportunity to share with people that that see these things in their own life. And you know what I'm hoping is that, and what both of us, is that our listeners are finding benefit from what we have to share each week. So thank you again for joining this time with us. Like our YouTube channel, right? Subscribe to this podcast. And again, if you have any questions, we would love to be able to answer them.
And everybody have a great week until next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.